What is up, everybody? Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Hope you had a good weekend. I certainly did. Enjoyed the fights. A lot of stuff going on, so I just thought I would jump on live. We could talk about whatever you want to talk about, as I usually do on these live chats. I'll give my opinion on the fights and what happened on Saturday. We can talk about fights that are coming up. We can talk about any of the news that's going on in boxing. Anything that's on your mind, I would be happy to answer your questions and kind of just chat about the fight game. I'm going to start, though, by talking about Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev. And if there's one thing that gets me aggravated, you could probably tell by the comments on my YouTube channel and some of the ones that I responded to. Nothing gets me a little more aggravated than when people say, oh, you're biased in favor of a certain fighter. Usually what that means is they are biased in favor of the opposite fighter that they saying I'm biased in favor of. But I honestly do not care who wins these fights. I had Pereira winning the fight on Saturday. I thought he won rounds 1, 3, and 5. And let me go through this a little bit because I want you to understand sort of how this works. So, round 1, very clear round, in my opinion, for Alex Pereira. Nobody argues that. So Alex Pereira wins round 1. Round 2, very clear round for Magomed Ankalaev. I think no doubt about that. So there is a no question there. Then round 3, we're going to skip round 3 for a second. Round 4 is a no doubter for Magomed Ankalaev. And then round 5, I think it's a closer round, but I do think that Pereira won that round. He landed the bigger shots, stuffed a lot of the takedowns, and while Ankalaev had some control, I just kind of thought that Pereira did enough to win the 5th round, as did 2 of the 3 judges. So I had it 3-2 for Pereira, and the fight comes down to the 3rd round. And I agree, and I think I said this on Twitter when I announced my score. Hey, this could go either way. This could be either type of fight. All of a sudden, I'm getting all this hate from people. Oh, you're an you hate Ankalaev. I think Ankalaev's actually a pretty good dude. I do like Alex too, but I like them both. And I don't really care who wins this. But to me, it was like that's how the fight went down. It was a very close fight in round. It swings on how you see round 3. I don't think you can sit there and say, hey, Ankalaev won the last 4 rounds clean. There's some people are saying. I just don't get that. And so that is my take on that. And we will get to some of your answers, some of your questions in a second. I'd be happy to do that. I want to talk about this, by the way. Just so you might have seen this on my Facebook page. I put a couple posts that were probably pretty cryptic, retirement and all good things must come to an end. I have been thinking about retiring, and I'm 65 years old. I love what I do working. I love doing this. I love writing stories. I love being at the fights. What I don't love is the business that goes around this. And some of that stuff is difficult to deal with at times, right? There's a lot of politics and there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that that you guys don't know about and you don't deal with and everything. And so I have been debating, do I continue to work, or do I just go on and say, you know what, I had my time, I had a great run, I'm going to move on and go to another stage of my life. For the time being, I think I'm going to continue doing this and stay forward. My goal would be to do this for another 5 years. 2024, as much as I liked my time at Yahoo, and I loved my time at Yahoo, 2024 might have been the best year of my life in terms of working. I had a blast, right? 2024 was totally KevinIole.com, right? And my YouTube page. I had a blast doing it, but outside of the work, outside of doing this, it was a little bit different. So if you saw my post and you were wondering what I was talking about, what I was doing, that's what that was about. For the time being, I am going to go forward, continue doing this, because you know what? I love it. I'm a degenerate like a lot of you guys. I love the fights, love talking about the fights, and I love telling stories of fighters and their teams. So let's go forward. Are you going to be at the Apex show this Saturday? I probably will be there. I'm not 100% certain if I am going to be there, but probably. Let's see what we have. So exactly what did they legalize recently in MMA? Knees to a grounded opponent? No. If an opponent is actually grounded, no. They changed the definition of a grounded opponent, and they allow 12 to 6 elbows. Now, those were the biggest rules. So John Jones's elbow that got him disqualified against Matt Hamill a number of years ago, that elbow would now be legal, and John wouldn't be disqualified with those, with those kind of things, as the way it was going. So that was that. Let's see. Do you think UFC waiting below JDM winner before deciding the future of Islam? It seems that the UFC promised Oliveira a title shot. If JDM wins, I can see Islam vacating and making a Topuria Oliveira title. What I think is going to happen is that, yes, Islam is going to defend against Oliveira. I believe that. And I don't know anything, so I don't want you to say, oh, Kevin said this is a definite. I believe that Islam and Oliveira will fight at UFC 317 International Fight Week. I also think that we'll see Ilya fight Arman Sarukian on that same card. And then if they win, I think you'll see Ilya fight Islam for the championship. And then maybe if Islam wins, then maybe he goes to 170. That would be kind of my thought on how it works, but there's a lot of moving parts, and Dana said it Saturday night, which I think is an interesting thing. A lot of people don't think about this, but it's like not everybody wants to fight all the time on any particular day. So, maybe like their kid's birthday's on a certain day. So, they say, hey, Islam is going to fight on this date. And, Charles's kid's birthday, I'm just throwing that out there as an example, was on that day. He doesn't want to fight then. They go to somebody else. And so there's a lot of things that happen that decide when these fights go, right? And so, there's when you have so many balls in the air and you're juggling so many things, and then you got to negotiate contracts on top of that, that's what makes it harder, right? And I think that's what's difficult when you're trying to predict, sort of what happens. But so my predictions, I believe Jones and Aspinall will fight at International Fight Week. I believe it's going to be Islam and Oliveira, and then I think we'll see Arman and Ilya fight. I could be wrong. Of course, that's a really loaded card, and they might decide to put somebody else, one of those fights, on another card. But that's kind of what I think is going on here. Your thoughts on Ali Abdelaziz cozying up to FBI Director Kash Patel so the FBI will permit Ali to finally travel and leave the country for business work? I don't think that there, maybe there's something to that. I think that's a conspiracy theory that I don't subscribe to. So, I'm sorry. I just don't agree with that. Do you think Jalen Turner sticks to his retirement? So here's the thing with guys like this, right? I just talked about, hey, do I want to retire, right? I've been doing this a lot longer than Jalen Turner, but I think, a lot of these guys, you have to have ego, right? And I'm not saying this in a bad way. You have to believe you're the best in the world. And there's guys that we look at and we say, they're never going to be world champion. But there's a lot of those fighters, they still believe, hey, I lost this fight because of this, and I lost that fight because of that. And so they believe that they can still be world champion. And then maybe there's a fight where it finally hits them. They lose to somebody that they knew they shouldn't lose to, or they felt they shouldn't lose to, and they decide that's it. So, I think when Jalen looks at his situation, he's lost a couple of fights now. I'm sure he felt like he was going to win on Saturday night. He was really never in the fight. I think that's, that makes a guy say, yeah, I'm going to have to think about this, and I may walk away. And I think that's kind of, um, what we're seeing out of him. Um, Now, when he spends time and he says, "What am I going to do with the rest of my life?" and I'm still really good at this, and I have some wins left in me. He may have finally come to the realization that I'm never going to win the title, but he may also realize, hey, you know what? I might not be the top 3 or top 5, but I'm still pretty good and I might come back. So I would wait and see, let him get away from the emotions, let him think about it for a while. And I think at that point, we'll have a better idea. If I had a guess, I'd say he's done, but I don't want to ever say, I think that he is out. Let's see here. Yuri versus Ank first, and winner faces Alex. Why do you think Erie deserves another title shot? So he has one win. I'm not sure that he deserves another title shot just yet, right? I think both Yuri and Jamal need to get some wins together. I think the rematch is the right way to go. I mean, given what Pereira did in the division, given what he's done since he's been in the UFC, given how big of a star he is in the business, I think he deserves that, right? And I think Ankalaev would not mind fighting him. There'll be more money for Ankalaev fighting in a fight like that. I think the pay-per-views would be bigger. So my guess is that the rematch happens. You never know, but I just don't see. Even though Yuri had the good win over Jamal in LA, I don't think Yuri, has done enough yet to qualify for another title shot. You got to put together, because he got knocked out pretty bad in those fights, right? And I think one win over Jamal Hill doesn't change that. So that's my setup. Let's see, what do we got here? Mike, my man, Mike G. The GOAT continues. I don't know about that. Let's see here. Dana hinting at possibly stepping down and setting up a successor for his UFC brass in his role at the UFC 313 press. I think what he wasn't talking about stepping down, but he was talking about hiring boxing people to come in and run. I think Nick Khan is going to actually run the business side of the boxing. Nick Khan is the president of the WWE. Nick also used to be an agent for CAA. He was my agent for a while, for a number of years. He was the one that negotiated my original Yahoo contract, and I was with Nick for a while. So full disclosure there, so but Nick also negotiated Top Rank's ESPN deal. So he was the one that helped them get that. Nick is a TV expert, rights deal. And so Nick does really good work in that area. And so, he's going to run it. I think they need to get a boxing person in there that, Dana knows MMA really well. Dana loves boxing. He knows the sport of boxing, but he hasn't followed the sport of boxing. And I think with everything he's got going on, because when you look at it, he's got 4 major things that he has up right now. He's now the head of the UFC, the CEO of the UFC. He's running this, whatever we're going to call this boxing league, TKO or whatever, the Turkey Al Sheikh Boxing League. He's got Power Slap, and then he's on the board of Meta. So with all that going on, I think he needs to have a person that, will be a boxing expert and can talk to him about, who the good fighters are and that type of thing to run. Dana's still going to be in charge, and you'll see Dana be the front man and everything. But I think, he realizes now he's one person, and, he's not going to be able to do what he did for so long. Let's see, what do I got here? Go to the next one here. What about the winner of Jan Ulberg immediately fight for the belt? Especially if it's Ulberg, he's been on a roll. I don't think that's a bad idea. But having said that, I think still there's more money in a fight and a rematch with Pereira. And how do you say to Pereira, like, think about that? He's taking fights on short notice. That was his 5th title fight in a year, his 4th title defense in a year that he was trying to make on Saturday night. This guy who's done everything you have asked him to do. He's faced an absolute murderer's row of contenders, right? He's just been there, fighter after fighter after fighter. He wants a rematch. It was a close fight. I thought he won. some of you people I saw in the comments thought he won. And you know, so yeah, I think he deserves it, and given it was close, I think, hey, run it back. Ankalaev will be the champion going in, and that's an advantage. So yeah, I think Alex deserves it, but if they decide to go another direction, the winner of Jan versus Olberg, I think would be a good choice as well. Let's see what we have here. Thoughts on those nasty, mean words Ankalaev said about Yuri? I think Yuri is a stylistic nightmare for Ankalaev. Yuri will drown him with forward pressure. That was a little bit what I wrote my column about, and I think that is an interesting point. Look at the guys, and I'll just take the last two, Alexander Rakic and Pereira. Both are guys that move forward, that strike, that are aggressive. And in both of their fights against Ankalaev, they wound up getting pushed back. It's very, there we go, Jacob. See, my left hand is up. I am live. But yeah, I think that, what was I saying? Now I forgot where I was going at. Oh yeah. I think when you say, Yuri's stylistic nightmare, Yuri makes a lot of mistakes, and we see Ankalaev does not make a lot of mistakes. And, I think the reason that Pereira beats him is, Pereira's good and capitalizes on those mistakes, and he blasted him. So I believe that, Yuri needs to just go out there and get a couple of wins, right? To me, that is my thought process. I think he needs a couple of wins, and if he gets those wins, then then we can change things. So let's see here. Will TKO boxing with Dana White take over boxing in the next decade? Takeover boxing is an interesting term. I'm not sure they will take over boxing in the way that they have taken over the UFC, right? There are people that would rather be in the PFL or whatever, but I think if you take all the MMA fighters in the world as a whole and you said you can fight where you want, the vast majority of those, well over 90%, well over 95% would say, I want to fight in the UFC. If you bring in this new boxing venture and you say the same thing, I think, there's going to be a lot of them that want to fight for Dana's venture and Turkey's venture. But I also think there are going to be some that don't want to do that. A lot of it, I think, is going to have to do with the success and how they set it up and what happens. So it's going to be a thing that's going to take time. And you mentioned in the next decade. So that's certainly, it's a fair period of time to judge. But I don't know that I would say completely take over, but I think that they will make a big footprint into boxing. And I think what they're going to do is, Lorenzo Fertitta said this to me one time talking about the UFC, because both he and Dana were boxing fans. And so Lorenzo said, when we bought this thing, we said we wanted to take the things that we still loved about boxing and keep them, action, good fights, and the things that we didn't love about boxing, take them out, stripping champions of their belts and crazy mandatories and all that kind of stuff, right? And just want to have best versus best. And so that's, that led to the UFC success. I think Dana, is going to be able to do a lot of those things with boxing. But now look at the difference. MMA in 2001 was not very big. Most people didn't follow MMA at the time. You had Pride, which was the dominant MMA league. The UFC was kind of struggling. The rules were still in flux. There was a lot of stuff going on at that time. Now boxing is in a different place. The sports world's in a different place than it was then. And, nobody knew who these fighters were that the UFC had now. But now there's great fighters all over the world in boxing. And, if you don't have the vast majority of those on your side, what impact, because people are still going to watch the other league. If, let's say Gervonta Davis is in this other league and not in TKO, or Ryan Garcia, or whoever your favorite fighter is that you like, if he's not in that new TKO league, then you're still going to pay attention, on the other side. So I think it's really, really interesting. So anyways, Love your work. Do journalists feel the pressure not to displease the company? Is Bruce Willis my twin brother? um, yeah, man, I wouldn't have minded hooking up with Demi Moore. So what the hell, you know? Um, uh, but no, no, I don't know how anybody else feels, but I don't think people feel like they're trying to please the UFC or they're trying to please, you know, I feel like I'm going to write what I believe. I'm a columnist, so I'm allowed to give my opinion. That is my job, right? Sometimes I have to write news stories because that's the way it is, especially I'm a one man outlet, right? Um, but when I try to write an opinion-based column, I write what I think. Somebody said to me the other day, I wrote a column about the lawsuit that was filed against Top Rank, and I talked to another reporter, and I'm not going to name who the person was because said it to me in a private conversation, but I'll kind of give you an idea sort of what the gist was, and he said everybody in boxing thought you were really were really close with Todd DeBuff, the president of Top Rank, and you really gave it to him in that column. And I said, I do like Todd. Todd's a good guy. I've known him for 30 years, but I wrote what I believe. I was critical of him. If I've written things negative toward Dana and the UFC, I write what I believe. Now, you have to have facts, right? I think there's my opinion and your opinion, and there's somewhere in the middle is probably the truth, but your opinion has to be based in fact. And I always look at it and I say, hey, if I base everything on fact, I don't have to worry. I'm stating my opinion. I know my facts are accurate. And then, hey, this is what I believe is going to happen. And if somebody doesn't like it, I think that's too bad, right? That's our job as journalists: speak truth to power if we have to do that, and try to get the truth out there. That is that's my thought. So, anyways, let's see. Basil Lomachenko. You got Lomachenko spelled wrong, Basil. Come on. Be honest. Boxing has been kicking MMA's ass since 2023, especially after TKO sucked the soul out of their organization. Boxing, I have written many, many times that boxing has been doing a lot of good stuff. It's especially business wise in the United States, it's not doing hardly anything, right? So, I mean, if we're talking the United States and we're just talking that, boxing is way down. Now, other parts of the world, I mentioned in my piece last week, Noe Inoue in Japan. What was his Lewis Neary fight? I think it was a $20 million US gate. 56,000 people were in the Tokyo Dome. England, it's, boxing is huge, so many places in the world, but it's not that way in the US right now. The Tank Davis fight didn't do a huge pay-per-view number, at least relative to what you would think that it might do, right? So, I think there's things from a business standpoint, like I love boxing, right? And I grew up a boxing fan. MMA didn't exist when I grew up. And I've been a boxing fan since 1964. So that's a long ass time. And I have Sugar Ray Leonard right there, Muhammad Ali and George Foreman there, Ali and Sonny Liston there. Here's a signed picture of me and Sugar Ray Leonard right here. Ali Frazier poster here. This is my thing, Secretariat down here. What can we do? Me and Floyd Mayweather up there. So I have a lot of boxing stuff around me. So what I'm saying is I love boxing. But I call boxing out a lot of the times because I do love it and I want to see the sport rise up. And I know what it's like when it is good. And, think of that, Hagler Hearns fight, the energy in the crowd on that night, or Corrales Castillo, or, now the fight didn't play out, but Mayweather Pacquiao, right? The people were so into that. I remember turning to Tim Dahlberg that night. Tim was a columnist for the Associated Press, and we were sitting next to each other. And I said, this is our Ali Frazier. It was just, that night, I had goosebumps, right? But to say it's kicking MMA's ass, I don't, look at what the UFC is doing. They're worth, $12 billion right now. They're a force all over the world. They're building these performance institutes everywhere. They're investing back in the business. They're going to get a massive television deal this year. I I agree with you if we're talking outside of the US that boxing is doing really well, but inside the US it's doing shitty, and I think that needs to change. There's a lot of good fighters in the US, a lot of good young fighters coming up. There's a lot of good fighters that are in their primes right now, but the sport from a business standpoint is a mess in the United States, and that has to change if we're going to do that. So I hope that answers your question. Samir said, "Do I think Jones versus Aspinall will happen in the summer?" I do. Personally, I think it's going to happen at UFC 317 on International Fight Week. I talked about that a little bit before. We shall see, but that is my guess. Do I think Ankalaev got more hate after the Yuri comments? Ankalaev is getting a lot of hate from a lot of people. I like Ankalaev. I think he's a good guy, right? I spent time with him before the fight, and he is a really good dude. And I don't know why people hate on him. I think Alex is an easy guy to like, and Alex has a good story, right? But I think when we say a lot of times when we say this, you're thinking of a very narrow perspective. Who you follow on social media, and you see people there, and you say that's everybody. Right. I've had people say everybody knows that you're biased in favor of, boom. Well, you think I'm biased in favor of X, whoever the fighter is, but there's several billion people in this world, and I don't think all several billion of them think I'm biased, to use me as an example. So, I'm sure that Magomed got some hate for his comments about Yuri, and I always would, be a little classier myself and take the high road because he has the last laugh. He is the freaking champion. He's got a lot of say in what happens to Yuri in the next fight, right? So he won that way. He doesn't have to make comments, but it hurts when hey, look, it's happened to me. I've gotten people say things that were nasty about me, and and probably some of you on here have done that. And I like to feel like I'm a good guy and I do things for people and I'm fair and I'm honest. And sometimes when you get ripped publicly, it stings. And I'm sure Magomed didn't like that. But still, I think, sometimes you just got to think about it and bite your tongue. But it's tough in the public eye when that happens. Let's see. What do we got? How long does the UFC keep King Green around at this point? Yeah, I think, I think he is starting, that kind of slide. It might be time, maybe give him another couple of fights. He's generally been an entertaining fighter, but all of a sudden, it's, how entertaining to see what Roofy did, but how entertaining did King make that fight? Not much. So, I certainly get your question there. And I think that's something that people need to think about. Thoughts on all the stars losing their belts? I saw Iole Depot mention, and I didn't want to reply to his comments online about this is the worst the UFC's ever been in terms of stars, and I'm like, are you nuts? Pereira is still a star. Just because he lost, he's still a star. Believe me when I tell you, the world is bigger than the United States, right? Islam Makhachev is a star. Ilia Topuria is a star. Merab Dvalishvili is a star. John Jones is a star. They have a lot of personalities. They may not have that Conor McGregor figure that's selling 1 million pay-per-views, but I'm going to tell you this. In the market that we're in right now, I'm not sure, Conor McGregor could sell 1 million pay-per-views at this point, right? Conor's a great salesman. He's got an unbelievable record in terms of, his pay-per-view buys. But this economy right now and the marketplace for pay-per-views is so, so, so difficult that I don't know that there's anybody out there doing that. But I think the UFC, they're selling out, they're getting big gates. They're not. How do you think they're doing that? Obviously, the brand plays, but they have stars from all corners of the world. And I think that, Leon Edwards may not be a star in the United States, but he is huge in the UK, right? And you think of those kind of things. And I think Islam is big in the US, but he is really, really big in Russia and the Middle East and places like that. And I think we forget how big this world is. So, I like Ade, and I think he's a good guy. I think he was mistaken in anybody else who has that attitude. I think the one good thing, Bitcoin, that I will say about this is, you know, you see it in boxing, the promoter wants their guy to win, right? And, you know, I remember when Top Rank and Don King went at it for De La Hoya Trinidad back in 1999. And Arum was so behind De La Hoya. De La Hoya loses the fight. And Don King was the post fight press conference. You know, Don King was crowing, "The lights are out in Arumville. The lights are out in Arumville." And Arum was so mad he had his PR guy pull the plug on the microphone so King couldn't talk anymore, right? The UFC doesn't operate like that. Whoever wins, wins. They're all UFC fighters. And so the UFC feels like, you know what? No matter who wins, we're good with it because we are promoting everybody. And I think that's something that, you know, they will bring to the boxing league, right? They're not just going to promote the top two guys on a card. They're going to promote everybody on a card. And it takes time, but those fighters will eventually get known by the public, and you'll start to see them have, you know, so get some recognition. So let's see here. I think I talked about this one before. Jan has a dominant performance against Olberg. When has Jan last fought? I'm just going to look up Jan's because off the top of my head, I'm not 100% certain. I don't think he's fought in a couple of years, right? Since Pereira, if I'm not mistaken. Am I missing something, or has he fought since then? Yeah, so his last fight was July of 23 against Pereira. So he's in his last four fights, he's 0-2-1. He's 0-1-1 in his last two fights, and he hasn't fought in almost 2 years. So why would he deserve an immediate title shot if he beats Carlos Olberg? I don't see it. Like, that is not earning your title shot. I get that he's been around a long time and he's done a lot of good things, and he's a former champion. But you know, 2 years is a long time. You know, and he hasn't been in there. So that is my my guess. Let's see. Any idea where UFC 318 might happen? No, I haven't talked to them about that at all. So I think it might be in Texas, but you know, I do not know. I do believe Chimaev can fight in the United States though. So Chimaev in the United States. So we'll see there. Let's see, what else do we have? Good question. Does Max Holloway defend his BMF title against Dustin Poirier for his last bout? And if so, is it going down in New Orleans? That was mentioned to Dana, and he was into that, right? You know, so I think that is a very good possibility that you could see that. You know, and what a fight that would be, right? I mean, what a good fight that would be for the UFC to do. So, you know, I think that is for the BMF title. You know, imagine Dustin winning the BMF title in New Orleans and walking away. But imagine Max, you know, one of the really, truly good guys in this sport, going into enemy territory. You know, I use the word enemy loosely because, you know, he's not enemies with Dustin, but going into enemy territory and winning the fight and sending the fans home unhappy as Dustin, you know, loses. So I think there's a lot to go in there. So I like that idea quite a bit. Is it fair to say that Pereira practiced more takedown defense in his ground game, like getting up? That's why he seems so hesitant to strike. You know, it's interesting. I think obviously he worked on takedown defense a lot because he didn't want to be on the ground, and he knows that, you know, he's a black belt. He knows he can submit, but he also knew his best chance to win was to land that, you know, big right hand or one of those big kicks and do it that way. And so I think, you know, his plan was, you know, hey, I want to go out there. I want to take Ankalaev's legs out from under him. That's why right off the bat, you saw him going after the legs. That's what Alex does. And he really made a concerted effort in that first round to go after Magomed's legs. And I thought that, you know, we're gonna see him chop Ankalaev down. But Ankalaev turned it around, and distance control is so important. And he got into that range where he was able to strike comfortably, and it was too close for Pereira. You know, Pereira needed more room to throw his hands where they were. Pereira wanted to be like a step and a half back, and Ankalaev kept him in that, you know, that distance most of the fight. And I thought that was a really important factor in the fight. Like, if he was able to just have that extra foot and a half, even if he doesn't knock him out, I think the perception of the way the fight is being fought, if he's the one moving forward, given how close it was, as opposed to he's being backed up by a wrestler, right? I mean, that's something that people think of. So, good question. I do like that. So let's see, what do we got here? Are we in the golden age of women's boxing with Taylor, Serrano, Nicholson, Shields, Mayer, Baumgartner, Jones, Price, Fandora, Dubois, etc.? I think there's a lot of great women, and you make a really good point. I mean, the Serrano Taylor second fight, if it could have topped the first, it did. I mean, that was just amazing. They're going to fight again now for the third time, coming up. I think boxing fans, if you're a boxing fan and you're not watching some of these women's boxing matches, you're losing out. But I think what happens sometimes, there's bias. People look at the records and they see, 12-1 with one knockout. And people want to see knockouts. And I think, men especially want to see knockouts. And I think, for women's boxing, two things have to happen. They've got to find an audience of women's fans. Like, I went to a couple WNBA games. I live in Las Vegas, and our WNBA team has been back-to-back champions. So I went to a couple of the WNBA games. There's a lot of young girls there with their mothers and, and their sisters or whatever it is. But, a lot of women are attending those games, and that's inspirational for them. They can now, hey, I want to play in this league too, right? And, we've heard that on the men's side. Conor McGregor attended UFC 92. He watched, what was his name? Tommy Ryan? And but he wanted to Tommy Egan, and he wanted to fight in the UFC after seeing that. So I think that boxing needs to promote the women's fight to women more too, right? I mean, it's being promoted to men, but I think get the women out, because there are so many of those good female fighters out there. But I agree with you. I think there's a tremendous amount of really good women boxers out there. What do I think about the MMA guru? I don't really know him. I know of him, but I've never met him, never talked to him. So I don't really have an opinion. I know he's popular, so he must be doing something right. I had actually invited him to come on a stream with me. I emailed him, but I never heard back. So that would be pretty much what I think about that. Is Topuria teasing a match between him and Conor? No. I mean, if Conor comes back, and I don't think he is, he's going to probably face somebody in like the 4-9 range, right? I think, if you want to see, if you think Conor is going to fight again, look at the rankings at welterweight and at lightweight, and look at the guys that are maybe 5-10, 4-9 in that range, and pick out a striker, a fun striker, and you might get your guy, right? That's what I think. If Conor comes back, I'll believe it when I see it, because I'm not sure Conor really wants to train, to be honest with you. I think Conor's, I said this before, and people don't understand what I was talking about. I think Conor loves to fight, and if there was somebody that would fight Conor tonight at T-Mobile Arena and without having training, I think he would take the fight. But the training for 2 months, that's not what Conor wants to do at this stage of his life. And so things always happen when he's in training camp and that type of thing. And I think, look, he doesn't need to do that. Why do it if you don't need to, right? And so my guess is Conor doesn't fight again, but if he does fight, like I say, that's how I would say, that you're there. So rumor is Patty might wind up fighting Topuria instead of Michael Chandler. Will Topuria's fight be announced before UFC 314? I talked to his management team last week, I think it was, or the week before, and there was nothing close to going at that point. So, things change, but I'm trying to wonder why that rumor would be, if they put Chandler in the co-main event, why they would take him out of it and put Ilya in there. I know there's a little bit of heat between Ilya and Patty, but I'm not sure. That's a fair fight too at this point. Patty, Patty's big. He's big in his weight class. But Ilya is a world champion. Ilya's beaten, really elite guys. And Patty, what is Patty rank? 12, 13, something like that. So that's kind of my thought. So anyways, let's see here. What do I think is next for Max Holloway? I think what we kind of talked about before, would be a good fight for Holloway. I definitely think keep him in the mix at lightweight, have him fight one of those top contenders. If it's Dustin, I think that is a really good one. Let's see. Magomed is the new 205-pound champion. He heard Alex in round 2 say by the bell. Yes, he did. There are. Show us your room. And my camera's attached. I can't take it off. Let me get this. This thing crashed down. All right. So we'll do a little show and tell here. So that is me and Sugar Ray Leonard. I have a painting up there of Ali and Liston. That was the famous photo, Neil Leifer's photo where Ali is going like that. And so that's what is there. But behind me, I just have bookcases with a lot of books, right? And that used to be my background, and everybody was trying to see what books I was reading, right? So I decided, hey, I'm going to get my logo behind me, and we'll do that. So Floyd was really good in his day. Yeah, you think? Yeah, he was pretty good. Let's see. Mauricio Rufy would KO Michael Chandler and Patty Pimblett in the same night. Chandler, I would say yes, because of the style that Chandler fights and the style that Mauricio Rufy fights. I would say yes, that I agree with that. Patty Pimblett, I think, would be a different story, right? Styles make fights, and I think that's a different matchup. Down the line, when Rufy gets more experience, maybe slightly different. But yeah, that's going to be good. Let's see. How did you have the fight? I had a 48-47 for Alex. I had it exactly like you did, and I scored it exactly like you did. 1, 3, and 5 for Alex, 2 and 4 for Magomed. But I'll reiterate, because I know we have people coming and going. It was a close fight. It could have gone either way. It comes down to me, really, it comes down to the third round, how you score the third round. 1, 2, and 4, very clear rounds. 1 for Alex, 2 and 4 for Magomed. I think 5. To me, it looked like an Alex round. You can make an argument, but I thought 3. I think 3 is the round that really decides the fight there. Interestingly enough, let's see. I think King would rather die in there than retire. Yes, I agree with that. That is true. Let's see. The UFC is not great at making stars. I don't know how you say that, right? I mean, they are in a growing sport that is 30 years old. And look at the people that they have had so far that have crossed over and how big some of those people are. Look at the ovation Chuck Liddell got. Chuck Liddell hasn't fought in 15 years, and look at the ovation he got Saturday when he was introduced. Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor, Randy Couture, just up and down the line. You think of all those people and the stars that they built, over the years. Habib, I think that they do. I think they do that, and the sport is still growing, right? I mean, it think of where the NBA was after 30 years, right? I will tell you, because I was living 30 years after the NBA was formed. That was in the mid 1970s, and I remember you used to have to watch playoff games on tape delay. I lived on the East Coast at the time. You wanted to watch an NBA playoff game, and you would have to wait till 11:30 after the news for the game to start, because it was on tape delay. That's how the NBA was 30 years after it was founded, right? Forget about the NHL. No, who cared about the NHL? I love hockey with all my heart and soul. I was a Pittsburgh Penguins season ticket holder for a number of years when I lived in Pittsburgh. This is my first year. I'm not a Vegas Golden Knights season ticket holder. I had season tickets for the first 7 years. This is now year 8. I didn't renew this year, but so I love hockey. But hey, look, 30 years after the NHL was founded, it didn't exist basically, right? So I think the UFC, what they've done has been remarkable, and it's one of the great business stories of our time, and I think it's only going to get bigger from here. So let's see. The UFC doesn't have a golden boy, aka mainstream marketable star for the US. I disagree with that, but maybe I'm wrong, right? You guys are the ones buying the tickets and buying the pay-per-views, but I look around and I saw that crowd in Seattle. They had a record gate in Edmonton. They had a record gate in Tampa. They had a record gate in England the last time they were there. Everywhere they go, they're getting sellout crowds, and you see the people there. It's not like they're saying, "Hey, we had 19,000." They span the crowd, and you can see the people were there. So, anyways, that's my take. Let's see here. Do you think pay-per-view model has reached a breaking point, or has it reached, or is it sustainable for the foreseeable future? I do not think it's sustainable, and I believe that it's basically going away, right? Somebody asked me a question on here last week, and I thought it was a great question, and I didn't get a chance to interview Dana. I was going to ask him this question, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to him here coming up soon. But like doing something like what the NFL does with NFL Sunday Ticket, right? Having that where you pay a predetermined price to buy all the UFC pay-per-views. I think that might be something that happens, right? So, we shall see, what they do. Their rights deals are going to be negotiated this year. They're in their exclusive window with ESPN right now. That ends in April. And then they could talk to anybody. I think everybody, believes that they're going to talk to Netflix. I believe that, and I think they'll probably have part of their gig on Netflix coming up in the future. I don't think it's going to be all on Netflix, but I think there might be like, say, 4 pay-per-views a year on Netflix and maybe a couple other events, and then some shoulder programming, with maybe the bulk of it being on ESPN. But we'll see. But I do think that that's a good point. Let's see. I am a beast. Absolutely. What's up, buddy? Good to see you. A UFC network like the WWE had would help the UFC grow tremendously. The current $80 pay-per-view is rough for people to pay. I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Like, that was something I mentioned about the last Crescendo, the boxing card in Saudi Arabia earlier in February. They charged $25.99. The very next week, Tank Davis fought in Brooklyn, and they charged $79.99. Now, are you out of your fucking mind? How are they putting, making that price be $55 more than the last Crescendo card, when the last Crescendo card was way, 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 way better? But in the United States, I mean, basically, the groups that were promoting, they said, screw the United States, and they largely did not focus promotional efforts here. Selling pay-per-view now is really, really hard, and you have to advertise and market and really work at it to have and make a number. And they didn't do that, and so as a result, I don't think they sold many pay-per-views, right? Davis didn't do a great number, but he did do a better number than they did in Saudi Arabia. And when you're looking at that, right, and you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach. Now, it turned out to be a compelling fight, and Roach did a lot better. But on paper, nobody thought that. Tank was at one point a 20-1 favorite. Nobody thought it was going to be that kind of fight. And the undercard didn't look very good on paper. So you're looking at it and you're going, okay, on this hand, I have Tank Davis in an appearance fight and nothing else. And on this hand, I've got Arthur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol, and I've got Virgil Ortiz and Israel Madrimov, and Martin Bacoli and Joseph Parker, which would have been Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, the one card was way better than the other. But we saw what happened on the pay-per-views. But I think at the bottom of the line, the pay-per-views is dead. The network, I think, is not. They have UFC Fight Pass, and I think that is kind of what excuse me, what they're setting up is like the WWE network was, right? Go to UFC Fight Pass, you can see boxing, you can see grappling, you can see all the UFC fights, blah 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 blah. And I think that's what they set that up to be. And I think they'll have some boxing offerings on there as well. But I don't think you're going to ever see the UFC network. Maybe a new branding, but we'll see. Let's see. Holy cow. Okay. I'm not sure what the holy cow is for. I'm sorry I'm behind because I'm answering these questions so long. I apologize. So let's see. Hell yeah, Daddy Kevin. Thank you. Appreciate that. How do I feel about the return of Keith Thurman? I like Keith quite a bit. I think he's a really good fighter. I never thought that he really hit everything that he could have been. If he had that Floyd Mayweather mentality or some of the other athletes, I think Thurman could have been really, really, really good. He was terrific. Don't get me wrong, but I think, he didn't have the hunger like some of the other ones. Keith is a smart guy, right? And he loves books. He loves traveling. He's got a lot of stuff that motivates him beyond just boxing. And, that's great. It's a way to have a great life. But when you want to be the best at something and you want to maximize your talent, you just have to focus on that sport for the whatever period of time you're in it. And Keith never really did that. So I'm happy he's back. And I think if we get 3 more fights out of him, that'd be great. I hope they're good fights. I just don't know that we will get that because Keith is not as motivated as some other people. He's got other options in life, and I'm happy for him, right? So let's see. Greetings from the UK. I think Dana will work with her and forget Oscar and Bob. Yeah, he said Saturday night that he would rather not work with Oscar and Bob, but if it came to it, he would. So we will see. Boxing is on fire in England. Yeah, that's what I said before. I agree with that. Makhachev, Topuria, Jones, Aspinall, which is more likely to happen? I think they're both going to happen, but I will. Which one do I think is going to happen first? I'll say, which is I think Jones, Aspinall. Let's see. Many of the historical combat sports journalists are resentful and grumpy with the business. Do you sometimes feel that business? Well, I talked about retiring, right? At the beginning of this thing. I love the business, right? I think I'm going to separate MMA because MMA is basically UFC, right? So all the other promotions, not a lot of people pay attention to any one of those in specific. The UFC is the only one that globally has a big audience, right? Nobody else anywhere has a big audience. So for the purposes of this question, I'm going to refer to the UFC. UFC promotes, they work, they try to get out there. Boxing does not do that. Most boxing promotional companies are small and don't have a lot of employees, and they employ part-timers and blah, 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 and all that stuff. And it's hard to get all the work done that you want to get done without having that company. So I'm trying to think how I can phrase this. So the business end of it sometimes is a pain, both on MMA and boxing. But I'm motivated by the fights, right? And I think that we keep seeing good fights. I've been, critical. I said this earlier. I've been critical of boxing for a long time, not because I hate it, but because I love it. I want to see it be better, and I know that there's good talent out there, and I know that, but that they make the same mistakes over and over and over. So that's why I'm hopeful that this Turkey slash Dana League can fix it. As far as the UFC, I think that they do a really good job. I don't agree with everything Dana says or does, or everything that the UFC says or does. When they banned Ariel after the UFC 199, I called both Lorenzo and Dana and complained and fought to get him, back in and back credentialed. But I think sometimes a lot of people say things that's in their own interest and not in what the truth is, right? And there's people out there that are talking about how great Jake Paul is, right? And Jake Paul is going to, do X, Y, and Z. Jake Paul is a great promoter. Jake Paul is a great salesperson. Jake Paul is not a great fighter, and had no way deserved to fight Canelo Alvarez, and he would have gotten destroyed had he fought Canelo Alvarez. So that's a long way of talking, I guess, to say that I feel differently than those guys do. I understand where some of their opinions are. I hope I made that clear, like what I think. But if you have other questions, just go ahead and throw them up, and I'll answer them. I just rewatched round 3. It's close, but I have Ankalaev winning it. I would not argue that, right? I thought live that that Alex won the third round, and I'm not, sitting here and arguing with anybody that Magomed didn't win it. I knew when the fight was over. When they said 49-46, I knew Ankalaev had won, because I knew there was no way Alex won 4 rounds, right? So at that point, I said, okay, Alex won, Magomed won this fight, even before he said and knew. I knew that, for that reason. But round 3 was a very, very close thing. Just getting in here, when PBC was on regular television, what was the main reason NBC or those stations did not keep PBC on their network if they had decent ratings? It was a time buy, right? So what they didn't have a deal like, UFC has with ESPN, right? Al Heyman was buying the time, and they were running out of money, right? So that was the issue, right? They had, what was it, $900,000 from that venture capital firm, and then they they blew through it, and they couldn't afford to put them back on. So that was what the thing was, right? But also, I just want to say, they didn't keep up the level of show that they started with, right? I remember I wrote a column. It's 10 years ago now, that it was 10 years ago this month. It might be this week. One of my dogs died on the day of the first PBC show. I was driving to the car, and my wife called me, and my wife at the time called me and said, the dog had passed, and I turned around and I didn't cover the show. I watched it off TV, but I went to be home with her and see the dog that night. But they had really good cards those first couple of shows, but then they didn't maintain that level of card. But it was a time buy, and that's the difference, right? So I hope that you get that. Let's see, what is this? The record gate is just because UFC is raising their ticket prices, good for them, but it's not allowing the majority of hardcore fans to attend events. Noah, I'm going to disagree with you very, 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 very strongly. People are buying the tickets, right? So who is buying these tickets? Maybe in Las Vegas, you say, yeah, it's celebrities and the casinos are buying them. But outside of here, who is buying them, right? And that's what tickets for those kind of sporting events go for, right? Try to go to a concert, try to go, to whatever you take, whatever event it is, no matter how high or how low they put the tickets, there's going to be people, oh, they're pricing me out, blah, 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 blah. Their prices are in range with, NFL, NBA, other sports, college basketball, whatever it is. Fight nights, blah, 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 blah. Their ticket prices are within range. And especially when they get outside of Las Vegas, and you're talking about, the places they go once or twice a year, Seattle, Tampa, there's real people buying those, um, buying those tickets. Where do I see Top Rank ending up after their ESPN deal is up? I wrote a column about that. I think they're facing a really tough climb. Um, I don't know where they're going to go. Hopefully they'll be able to find an outlet. Um, you know, do they end up on the zone? It's going to be tough, man, because Golden Boy's on the zone, Frank Warren is on the zone, Eddie Hearn is on the zone. Now you put Top Rank in, where are the dates coming from? You're going to have things overlapping each other and whatnot. And so I'm not sure that I would really think that's going to be a viable option for them. So, we shall see. But I think there's some of that. The UFC is the star itself that sells pay-per-views now. It's popular. Fighters help for sure, but the UFC is what sells tickets and pay-per-views consistently. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that, and I've written that a million times, but I think that what people are were talking about, was something about creating stars, right? So yeah, they have a baseline that they're going to hit on every pay-per-view show, that, hey, it's a UFC show. This is what the baseline pay-per-view number is going to be. But now if you want to get to, 500,000, if you want to get to 1 million, if you want to get to, 1.5 million, which I don't think is going to happen again. So I think that that's when you got to get have the big stars and the big names out there. But I agree with you, and that's smart, right? Because think about this: fighters are going to come and fighters are going to go. But what Dana did is he said, "I'm going to build this company that that no matter who's fighting, we're going to matchmake so we have even fights up and down the card." So they put on 12 or 13 fight cards a night. 12 or 13 fights a night on per card, and they match those. There's some blowouts, right? But they try to match them fairly. They're close in the rankings. They're perceived to be even, and you rarely see these big minus 3,000, minus 2,500 that you see on a lot of boxing undercards, right? Because the UFC has done that. And so when you have the fighters that are evenly matched and they're fighting for stakes, that makes the fights better, right? And so that's why I think, you see UFC does what they do. And that's why the brand sells, those 3 letters sell, because it's telling people, if you buy this, you're going to get this level of quality every time out. Sometimes you get a boxing card where the pay-per-view is unbelievable, right? I've been there for them, but then you get a lot of them where you're going like, oh my God, when does this end? Right? So it's a little bit of both, right? So what's my opinion on the UFC website not putting a flag next to Bilal? I don't know the answer to that question. I did ask Dana this once before, and he had an answer for it. I don't remember what his answer was. I don't see why he should be treated any differently, right? So I'm not sure what their reasoning is. So I don't want to criticize them because I don't know what it is, but I will agree that I think that Bilal should have his flag up there. Big KFC is more entertaining than PFL. Okay. Different sports, right? So it is different sports. I think to me, the biggest problem the PFL has is they are horrible promoters, right? I think they have a lot of good fighters and they could potentially make some really, really good fights, but they don't promote very well. So that is an issue I have. My complaint is they have priced out true fans. I remember going to the first Salt Lake fight versus Edwards. It was an amazing, historic moment. I paid $250. This time in Salt Lake, same seats, $2,500. I agree with that. I mean, I understand that, but it's the same thing. If I want to go to the Super Bowl and sit on the 50-yard line, I'm not going to be able to get the tickets, right? It's easy to say, hey, they should, like, there's a lot going on that people don't think about, right? And you sit there and you say, well, the UFC, I'm not saying you, Saul, but a lot of people say this, hey, the UFC fighters are underpaid. Okay, let's say if you believe that is true, then where does the revenue come from to pay him? From ticket prices and from, and all those kind of things, right? So now people are saying, well, yeah, I want the fighters to get paid and they're pay more. But then you have a lot of people stealing the pay-per-view signal, which is taking money directly out of the champion's pocket, It couldn't be more blatant. You're taking money straight from the fighter when you illegally stream a pay-per-view. No question about it. But you're okay with that. But then you want to say, well, pay them more. But then you're okay with, saying, I don't want to pay the ticket prices, but pay the fighters more. So I wish it was more accessible for everybody. That's why I applauded Turkey Al-Sheikh when he cut his pay-per-view price down and made it for $25.99. I applauded that because, he took a loss, but he is also a billionaire sitting from a country that is, the richest country there is, right? And they have money to, burn, like, they can light their cigars with that kind of money. So that, I understand your pain. I'm not minimizing it. I understand why you feel the way you do, but I think it's a business reality. And, whatever, if McDonald's could get $10 for a hamburger instead of, $2 or whatever they charge, they would do it, right? And so they're selling market price. So that is, what I would say there. Who is a middle of the pack guy that could use a heel turn gimmick to burst into stardom, kind of like Colby Covington, someone who has mic skills? Oh man, that is a tough one. I can't come up with that one, especially off the top of my head. Let me think about that and see if I can come up, as we're doing this, if I can think of somebody that pops up. Maybe that will be somebody. John Jones, perhaps. I don't know. How do I think Pyfer stacks up against Gastelum at elevation in Mexico? It's interesting. I think it's going to affect both of them. Kelvin has had his issues with his conditioning and whatnot in the past. I would tend to think Joe's going to be fine, fine on there. But we shall see. But I do think that is a really tough ask, and it depends on how long you're down there for. Remember, we used to call Cain Velasquez Cardio Cain, and then he got there and fought Verdum and found out, not so easy, right? So, do you ever watch one? They had a monster card in Tokyo 2 weeks ago. I do. They quit. They're not doing as much MMA as they used to, so I'm not as interested when there's not as much MMA. But also it's on like a lot of times here, what is it, 3 a.m. So I get up early enough as it is. Let's see. What do we got here? Great show. Why is the pacing of UFC pay-per-view so poor? Us on the East Coast don't leave the bar or restaurant until nearly 1:30 a.m. Yeah, I understand that. I think, they're putting 5 fights on, right? So, if you think about it, they can have 2 fights an hour. So when you get the first, 4 fights, you're basically at 2 hours. Now the title fight is 25 minutes. You want to build it up, and you're talking, that gets you back. And if the co-main event is a 5-rounder, which happens sometimes, I am totally sympathetic to that. I have been on the East Coast with a 7 a.m. flight, and I'm leaving the arena at 3 a.m, right? And going to my hotel, and then just got to go to the airport, straight from there. I feel your pain on that one. I don't really know how else they can do it, because, the rest of the world, they consider, and when they tried a couple of years ago, this is now maybe 10 or even 15 years ago, they moved it to the pay-per-view start to 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, and it tanked, right? They really lost. They really lost a ton. So, it's I feel your pain, but it's a tough one, Brandon. Tough one there. Hey, Maddie, how are you, brother? Thank you for showing up. Avery, my man, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Can Alex come back after that, or is his reign over? I do believe Alex can come back. I think it's a tough matchup for him. That is his toughest matchup right there. I think it's going to be tough for him to overcome. And he's 37, almost 38 years old, so he doesn't have a lot of time, right? I think that is a big factor in everything that he's been doing. But he knows that, right? He says, I'm doing what I want to do because I want to make as much money as I can before I age out. And so, that's something that I think, you know, but I think, assuming they come back, let's say, so what are we in now? We're in March. If they fight in, say, September, 6 months, I think Alex can do it. It's going to be tough, but I think he could do it. So let's see. Let's go for that. Dana needs to go to boxing and let Hunter take over. He doesn't even care about UFC anymore. I would disagree with that. I mean, Hunter is doing a lot of the UFC stuff, because Dana's got his finger in so many pies. So Hunter, you hear when they call it Dana, the fighters usually call it Hunter as well, because, he's doing a lot of that work. But I to say that Dana doesn't care, I believe me, he cares. Believe me, he cares. Do I collect UFC sports cards? No, I don't collect cards of any kind. Unfortunately, no. Maybe Ian Gary would be a good heel. Upcoming star has Ian Gary, but he's already a trash talker, right? I think he was talking about somebody kind of like was, a cliche ridden person, and looking for somebody who wasn't popular, who could all of a sudden explode. I think Ian Gary's already on the way up, and he's good on the mic. So I don't think he's kind of the one that we're talking there. So let's see. What are your thoughts on the best fight, the best argument compared to make fights and champs the more casual fans would prefer and make more stars? So I'm not sure I'm trying to understand the question. What is my thoughts on best fight to best argument compared to make fights and champs the more casual fans would prefer and make more stars? I think the casual fans are going to want to see the best fights, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I believe, that they're, that they want. They want to see good competitive fights up and down the card, and they don't want to see decisions. They want to see finishes. And so I think however you best get to that is how you go. You know, some fighters have that charisma and they can become a star, but other fighters don't have it, and they're never going to quite get to that level. But I think, if you put best versus best on more often and evenly matched, right? That's what I said before, Blue Bands. Let's have evenly matched fights on the undercard, right? So especially if you go to a boxing match and you sit there and you see the first, couple fights on a pay-per-view boxing card, you're going, I mean, my God, what is this? Everybody's minus 2,500, minus 1,600, minus 4,000. They're non-competitive fights. Let's make them all competitive, and I think that'll make more fans. Is that good? Do we want to keep going? Or we doing good here? Everybody want to stay up? Give me a thumbs up if you're cool with going more. Got a few more questions. Is Jones versus Aspinall going to be official? Not official yet, but I believe it is going to happen this year. Yes. What's your foresight of the new television deal? I think they're going to split the baby. I think we will see them do Netflix or something like Netflix, and then ESPN. I mentioned this last time when we had a chat. It wouldn't shock me if they did Google. It wouldn't shock me if they did Apple, right? Both of those, Apple has that Apple TV platform. Apple's the richest or second richest company in the world. They want to fill their catalog out. They made a really big bid for the NFL. So if Apple got some fight nights and maybe a couple of pay-per-views a year, I think that would fit good, and that's available around the world. So I think that is something that is possible to happen. Let's see. My man MMA Joey with the suit on, dude. I don't know if you saw MMA Joey's channel. If you don't follow his channel, Joey gives it to you straight. He tells you what he believes with passion and conviction. So you got to follow MMA Joey's channel. And what do I think about the ESPN pay-per-view disaster? I think exactly what you said, Joey. Disaster, right? I think that ESPN's got to get its act together, right? I mean, this has been going on since the beginning. I text Hunter Campbell a lot when I don't attend a pay per view, and I'm just giving him crap. How is the you know, how has that happened, right? Um, that it's so hard to buy. They changed it on Saturday. A good friend of mine works at ESPN, and he's in their program department. And it was the PFL pay per view that they had that I was trying to buy, and it was just a nightmare to buy it. And I called help, and the help system says, "Oh, you don't even have an account." I said, "I'm freaking logged into my account now. What are you talking about? I don't have an account." And so I got this, C-suite executive that called me so that I could get it. So I think ESPN really needs to look at how they're selling these pay-per-views and change, right? They got to get a better system because what they are doing now is not working, right? It's just not working. So something has to happen. So let's see. All right. You are the softest of the soy, and you are an asshole. So we are even. Let's see. MMA Joey and Kevin helping keep the sports honest. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, the suit was unbelievable. Now, I think I'm going to disagree with your take, though. It was a close fight, right? It was not a blowout in the fight, Joey. It was a close fight, and we've been talking about this. I don't know how long it's since you've been on, but I think it comes down to round three. I think Alex wins, clearly wins round one. I think Ankalaev clearly wins rounds 2 and 4. I believe Alex won the fifth, and then the third round is where it comes down. How do you see that fight having gone? So I thought you were a little over the top with your take, but I love your I love your passion for this. It's amazing. So let's see, what else do we have here? Bit of a hot take, but I think Jones easily beats Aspinall. It's like I go back and forth. I know how freaking good John Jones is. I've seen him for years. I've seen him up close for years. I talk to all the fighters, talk to the fighters privately and just say, what do you think? And like these guys that are the toughest guys in the world, they'll say, no, thank you. I don't want to fight that guy. Right. You hear that all the time. And that is just, it is a nightmare. So Jones, they don't want a lot of guys don't want any party in, but I think Aspinall's style is really fit for Jones, right? He's fast, he's got hard punches, he's got the great jujitsu. So I look at it and I go, hey, he doesn't have the wrestling to compete with Jones. But if he goes to the ground, he's not a fish out of water. He's been doing jujitsu since he was a kid, and he's got those hands. So I think that that's a fight that, boy, I'll tell you what, I think it's a fight, right? I mean, I could see Jones making it look easy, but I could actually see Aspinall, knocking him out. I just hope we see it soon so we don't have to say, I think, and we can talk about what did happen, not what I think is going to happen. Let's see here. Giovanni, my friend Kevin, how are you? I am doing great, pal. I appreciate you hopping in here. We're having a lot of fun, even though we got some people that are trying to aggravate me, but I am not getting aggravated today. So, I don't want to get taken down off of Google, or I would give a certain finger to that person who called me a soy boy. But, and of course he's a tough guy because he does it on that side when he's nowhere near around me. Right. Let's see here. What else do we have? Joey, dude. I mean, everybody wants you to fight this guy. MMA Joey versus MMA Guru. What is going on here? I may have to become a promoter and stage this fight. I might make some money, right? What's up, Manu? I appreciate it. Thank you. I hope everything is good in Mexico. John Jones in his oblique kick. Why don't other fighters use it like he does? I mean, I agree with that. I mean, you look at John and the impact that he's had. Very good with that. Of course, when it comes to MMA, you're the gold standard. Your opinion is gold. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Looks like we're out of questions. I will hang in there for a second or two if anybody else wants to. There's a couple more popped up. Who does the most improvement in the Ankalaev rematch, and who is your pick? I'm not going to pick. I'm going to I'll give you my take on, where I think that goes. Like, let's start right now. I think Ankalaev deserves to be the favorite. And I had a sports book send me the odds. Let me see if I can find out what those odds are. Um, let's see. Ankalaev. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. So in the rematch, the odds that were put out on Sunday morning, Ankalaev was minus 200, Pereira plus 170. As I said at the beginning, when I talked about how the fight might go, I thought that Ankalaev's strategy was brilliant because he got to the correct distance, and Pereira was not at the distance he wanted to be at, couldn't let his hands go at that distance. So, if Pereira can figure that out and get himself at a distance where he's comfortable, I think he has a chance, to move. Magomed was really on point. His kicks were good. He did, after the early trouble that he had, he had some trouble early in the fight, I thought, defending the kicks, but then he defended well as the fight wore on. So he made an adjustment in fight. That tells me that he's a smart fighter, has a good corner, and will, make even more adjustments in a rematch. Alex, on his standpoint, I think, he might want to have worked a little harder and not just accepted that, against the cage, and then maybe, felt like I can scramble with this guy if he got taken down. I didn't think he wanted to get into a scramble with him. So I think, the 2-to-1 odds probably are fair odds favoring Ankalaev in the rematch. I think Pereira has some areas where he can improve, but I think Ankalaev also is going to improve as well, because now that he's been in there, that was the best kickboxer he's ever been in there with. He did it against Rakic. He made Rakic back up, and Rakic is a very good kickboxer, and they basically had a kickboxing match. And he did it against Pereira, but I think he's going to add to his game because of how good he is against Pereira. So, I think Ankalaev deserves to be the favorite when they do have the rematch. So I don't see round 3 at all for Alex. I don't know why everyone is saying that. It's close, right? I thought the first part of the round was Alex's, and the second part of the round was Magomed's. And I'm trying, I felt like there was a right hand, and there was a jab and then a right hand that Alex landed in his part of the round that I thought was a big factor. And that was kind of why I went the direction that I did in giving him that round. I thought that was like the power is scored in pro fighting. And I thought that was a big factor in that round. But as I said, it was close, like Pantopia. It was not like we're sitting here saying, oh, Alex won that round going away. No, it was close. Like, it was like that. And that was one of the things. So let's see here. Made him very uncomfortable. Yes, I agree. Let's see. What do we got here? Nina Drama questions. What is this? Do you think Nina Drama is an industry plant? I don't have that she's doing her thing. I just don't like to see her tagged in UFC stuff, kind of like Power Slap. It made me unfollow the UFC account. She is employed by the UFC, so she's not an industry plant. She works for the UFC. She is employed by the UFC, so I'm not sure why you're surprised they put her up. She's trying to help get new fans, right? To appeal to a different fan base. You guys that are on this, we're all in the hardcore. Some are more hardcore than others, but we're into the fights and the techniques and all that stuff. But there's other people, it's an event to them, and maybe there's one fight they're interested in, or they just want to see knockouts or whatever. They're not as passionate about the fights as we are. It's just a fun night. And so UFC is using Nina to try to promote to some of those people. They're trying to just hit a bunch of different things. But Nina is a nice person. Leave Nina alone. She is a very nice person. Let's see. Okay, I already got that one. Hey, I don't know what that one was about. They were relying on calf kick too much. He was trying to slow him down with the calf kick, right? I think that's what he was trying to do. Take his legs out from under him. Hard to shoot if you take your legs out, right? I think Jelton needs to move to 205. There are really no great grapplers in that division, and he's a small heavyweight. Mm, he's weighing 235. He's doing pretty good. I think he's fine. I'm not sure I agree with that. Um, let's see. We already answered that one. Was Bobby Green? Yeah, he was robbed against Rufy. He was robbed of his consciousness. That was what he was robbed of. All right. If we're going to get those kind of questions, I think we will end it. Appreciate you guys. As I said, look forward to doing this with you guys more often. Okay, we got another one popped up. So let's see what we have here. I loved watching your channel. What is your favorite part of covering combat sports? Like I actually love the fights themselves. Um, I am if you go and you find Demetrius Johnson's armbar of Ray Borg, and you look behind, if you go over the fighters and you look over their shoulders, I'm in the first row, and sometimes we're on, there's light on us, and sometimes they're not. But if when you find that, you will see me sitting there, and I went crazy because of what Demetrius was doing, and I love that. Plus the personalities, Benjamin. I mean, you get to meet these people, and they're such unique personalities, right? And that's what I love about it. It takes a different breed to get in there and fight another person in your underwear in front of the whole world, right? And talking to those people and seeing how they think and what motivates them and everything, that makes it fun for me, and that's what I really love about it. I appreciate it. Thank you, JG. If you could let people know, subscribe to my channel, like the videos. I'm trying to grow. It's tough. I know, believe me, I know it's tough. But I would appreciate it. And also go to keviniole.com and if nothing else, sign up for an account. It's free. And we're not emailing you. We make you register so that if you post, we can keep track of spam. That's the only reason we do that. But we're not going to email you for anything. So I would appreciate it if you guys, if you're not already registered at keviniole.com, to go over there and do that. I would appreciate it. Anyways, let's see, what do we got here? I'll answer the last one. This will be the last one. Pereira should go to heavyweight. I don't think he can go to heavyweight. I mean, look, size is a factor. If he had that much trouble with takedowns against Ankalaev, what do you think John Jones is going to do to him, right? He's not going to be able to go out there and stand and, have John Jones at distance and land his big punches, right? So I think that showed us that the experiment or the thought that Alex would be a heavyweight, that, he was a middleweight that moved up to light heavyweight, and he's a big dude, but, he's different. I don't think and especially at his age, I don't think he can put on the kind of weight to be the heavyweight that he wants. So I am going to leave it at that. Appreciate you guys, and we will talk to y'all soon. God bless. Have a good one. See you soon.